Hey everybody, so I'm going to go through and make a video for the extra example 3. We may or may not get through all of them in class, so I thought I'll just make some short videos and you can go through and recheck what you need to. So we're going to start at A. It says f of x equals 3x over x squared plus x minus 6. So what I know is this. The top can be whatever I want it to be, but the bottom can't equal 0. Okay, so if that's the case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at x squared plus x minus 6 and think, hey, how do I figure out what would make that 0? Well, that one is a really nice one to just factor out. I've got an x, and then I think to myself, what multiplies to give me negative 6, but adds to give me 1? And that would be a 3 and a 2. And then I decide, okay, if I have to get positive 1, then the 2 is going to be negative, the 3 is going to be positive, correct? Which means what can this not be? That can't be negative 3, and this can't be 2. Okay, so now going back to the original instructions, it says the domain. Well, your domain is your x values, so my x can be anything but negative 3 and 2. Now, a long time ago, if we had been making this, we would just, last year, you could have just written x can't equal negative 3 or 2. But now we're taking it and putting it in interval notation. So therefore, I know that I can go this way forever from the negative 3, correct? So what's the number for that way forever? Negative infinity. Then it goes from negative infinity to 3. Can it be negative 3? Nope, it can't. So that would be a union. Now, can it be anything between these two? The answer is yep. Can't be them, so I leave it in a nice little parentheses. Negative 3 can go to 2, but then at 2 it stops for a second. And then we have another union of 2 to infinity. So several of the things that you're going to do today, you're going to have like 3 different parts to them. And that is okay. So right here, this is my domain, negative infinity to negative 3, union, negative 3 to 2, union 2 to infinity. So that really right there says any number but negative 3 or 2, and I'm just writing it in a different form. All right, let's take this next one. G of x is 3x plus 12 all over x squared minus 16. Do I care what x is on the top? No, that can be anything. So what I have to look at is look at the bottom and think, okay, what would make that 0? Because that will help me. Once I can find my domain restrictions, it's easier to write my domain. So x squared minus 16. You could think of that 2 different ways. You could just set that equal to 0, and so you could do x squared minus 16 equals 0. So therefore, x squared equals 16. So plus or minus 4. Now, you could do it that way. Most of you probably didn't think of doing it that way. You probably broke it into x plus 4, x minus 4. But does that give you the same domain restrictions as you got right here? The answer is yes. So oftentimes there's more than one way to skin a cat or to solve a pre-calc problem. So what I know is my domain, it can be anything except positive 4 or negative 4. So how do I write that in interval notation? Well, I can start at negative infinity and I can go all the way until I get to negative 4, at which point in time there's a hole or an asymptote. Something happens there. We'll learn about that next week. Then I've got a union, and then it can go anywhere from negative 4 up to 4, but then it stops. For a second, we've got a discontinuity, and then I can go from 4 to infinity. Now, it's better if you write all of this on one line, but I'm working in Smart Notebook on my laptop with a touch screen, so that's the best I can do. All right, let's go on and do a couple more. If at any point in time you're like, I can stop, then stop, and we're all good. But these look different. These have square roots. So this says h of x equals the square root of 2x minus 3 plus 1. So really all I need to look at is this guy right in here, because you know something about square roots. What do you know they have to be? Well, the square root can never be negative if I want a real answer. So therefore, I'm going to take this, I'm going to pull that right out and say, okay, 2x minus 3 has to be greater than 0. Now, could the number underneath the square root actually be 0? And the answer is yes, so I'm going to put an equal under there. But I know it's got to be 0 or higher. It can't be negative, so that's where I'm going to go with it. May I recommend you always write these out? When I was going through the notes last year, I would get some questions like this wrong just because I would say, okay, it's 3/2. Yes, but what happens with the 3/2? So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Then 2x greater than or equal to 3 divided by 2 divided by 2. So I know that x has to be greater than or equal to 3/2. And then I think to myself, are there any other domain restrictions, to which I say nope, because there's nothing in the denominator, so we're all good. So how do I write that? Well, x has to be greater than or equal to 3/2, and then it goes towards infinity. So I've got my 3/2, I've got infinity. Infinity is unbounded, so that's always got a parentheses, but then could it be 3/2? The answer is yes. So what kind of thingy do you get? You get a bracket. So my domain is 3/2 inclusive up to infinity. All right, the next one. Why don't you try it on your own real quick if you need to, and then check in with my answer. So what I know on this one is that really there's nothing on the bottom, so all I care about is this piece right here. So as I look through that, I think, all right, I know something about a square root. What do I know? That it can't be negative. I dropped my paper. I would just want to make sure I have my answer key next to me. So this one, be careful. Last year, I was doing this in front of the class, and I remember it quite clearly that I totally got it wrong, and nobody told me until like 3 examples later. So pay attention and let's be careful. I know that 3 minus 5x has to be greater than or equal to 0 because you can't have a negative underneath there, right? Okay, so I'm going to draw my line down, subtract 3, subtract 3. All right, I'm doing really well. Now, here's where the problem might end up. What's that little sign that you brought down in front of the 5? A negative. So I'm going to divide by -5, divide by -5. All is well. X is positive 3/5. However, what happens? Because I divided by -5, it flips over. So x has to be less than or equal to 3/5. So that means it's kind of going this way, which means it goes to negative infinity, and then it stops at the 3/5. Can it be 3/5? Yes. So my domain, negative infinity to 3/5. Be careful. All right, last 2 for this video. Oh gosh, we've got several things going on here. Let's see. I've got a square root on the top. So let's start there. What do you know? Oops, I'm going to stop because I'm hitting my free recording limit. We'll do this on the next one.